Well, shalom everybody, welcome back. Thank you for joining me for another book review. I have a very, very interesting book that I'd like to look at with you today that is, simply put, one of the best books that I've ever read on the subject. And the book in Hebrew is entitled Beit Gan Shalom, which means the Garden of Peace. And it's written by Rabbi Sholem Arush, which is, he's a Breslov rabbi, and he's been quite prolific over the last decade or last 2 decades in putting out really eye-opening books. And I have 2 colleagues, both of whom are responsible for getting me this first book, which I'm greatly blessed in getting. And I recently finished it. It took me quite a long time to read because it's very relevant to a lot of things that are going on at the moment for me in my life. So, in case you've already guessed, the book is focused on Shalom Bayit, that is peace in the home. And it's a book focused on marriage and having a happy marriage, essentially. And it's not only a book for married men, it's a book for men who are thinking of wanting to get married, thinking of maybe someday in the future getting married, or even men who are divorced or separated, or in any stage of being married, whether it's prior to the marriage or it's after the marriage. It's really not a book that rules any type of state out. And as soon as you pick it up and you start reading, there's approbations which are from very prominent people in the Jewish world that have put their support behind the work. And it's very important to get a book that has approbations. It has people that are very prevalent in the Orthodox Jewish world giving it their approval. But beyond that, just by looking at the contents alone, gets you thinking, what are these topics going to say? Because just merely reading the chapter headings alone, which is a similar experience that I had with Rabbi Victor Miller's books, are enough to get you to start turning the pages and reading. So I'll just read a few of just the chapter headers to sort of maybe give you a feel of what I went through the first time I opened this book up and started looking at it. One of the headers here, comments are debilitating. Remarks don't help. Remarks are degrading. One who criticizes is arrogant. And we're constantly told in this book that we're forbidden to criticize our partner. And that's one thing that I found very interesting and also challenging. Like, it's just completely forbidden to criticize. And the second thing that struck me is that any deficiency you can see in a partner is really a deficiency in yourself, and Hashem is allowing your partner to mirror that deficiency to you so that you'll change and you'll amend your ways rather than you actually trying to amend the ways of your partner. And I found that quite inspiring and quite frightening, actually, but in a good way. And it was something that subconsciously I thought was always true. But it wasn't until I actually read it, I went, okay, because over the years I have come across similar teachings as that, but none so completely devoted to the subject like is in this book. Now, I'm sure there are other good books out there on marriage, but this book probably is the least apologetic and is the most straightforward book that I've read. And so therefore, I would recommend this book, and I give it probably 1 million out of 10. Out of a score of 1 to 10, I'll probably give it 1 million, if maybe more than that, maybe 1 trillion. But having said that, it wasn't an easy book for me to read because it was a book that every so often, every couple of pages, I would be sighing because I know that there would be something that it was talking about that I perhaps didn't do to the best of my ability. And that wasn't a very good experience, but nonetheless, it was an important experience for me to have, and I'm grateful for it now. And I don't think this is a book that you just read once and you put down and say you've read it and walk away. And in fact, most of the Jewish writings that you'll read aren't books that are made like that. I mean, unless you have a photographic memory, which very few of us do. And it's become one of the books that I've read that has a quote in the book that's the all-time quote that I don't know if it'll ever be surpassed. And before I forget what it is, I'll read it to you, and it's located on page 304. And it's such a simple quote. It's about, I think it's one sentence really, but it sums everything up in terms of the importance of Musar, which is ethics and midot, and that is character. And the focus that I've been driving at for the last 100 videos or so, that we should be really kind of bringing to bear the correcting of poor traits and character flaws. And so this sentence really sort of sums all that up, because it really is an overlapping subject in the area of Musar, which is something that I'm sort of really focused on. I've been focused on in the last 2 years or so. So it's page 304. It's under the header of self-correction, which again is a topic that has taken me by storm, and I won't leave this world until I shake the world up with this subject and shake the religious world up with this subject as much as I can. And it says, and it's the bottom of the page, and it says, bad character traits are worse than actual transgressions. Hashem wants us to be more exacting about our character traits than with adhering to all the positive and negative commandments. For with good character traits, keeping the commandments is easy. And that's just, if that's not one of the most amazing couple of sentences that you've ever heard, then check your pulse. You might not even be alive. So let's have a look at some of the author's intention, short of actually reading the entirety of the book for you like I'm doing Duties of the Mind, which I could very well end up doing with this book because it's very easy to read. So the author starts out with an important message to the reader, and it says, every married individual should feel that he or she alone bears the responsibility of peace in the home. So that's an interesting statement straight off the bat, because it puts you in the driver's seat to be the one who's responsible to maintain a joy and a peace in the home, not your partner. And just about every detrimental relationship that you'll come across, and then you speak to one or two of the parties involved, one or both of the parties involved, they'll invariably throw their discontent on their partner when that's something that they shouldn't be doing. Any perceived discontent you have with a partner is something that you should use as a red flag or as an alarm to alert you to something deficient in yourself. Both partners in the marital union must learn their respective responsibilities and obligations and do their utmost to fulfill them. Neither should police the other. A person that's occupied with finding fault in someone else fails to see his or her own faults. Now I'll read that again because I didn't read it very well. Both partners in the marital union must learn their respective responsibilities and obligations to do their utmost to fulfill them. Neither should police the other. A person that's occupied with finding fault in someone else fails to see his or her own faults. And this is very much what's happening. And I came across a gentleman who I spoke to not too long ago, and he'd recently divorced his wife, and he went into sort of this huge monologue of why he did so. And it made me think of a section in this book that is entitled Your Wife is a Mirror. And so I began reading this section entitled Your Wife is a Mirror, and the other end of the call fell silent, and it really sort of stopped the person in their tracks from pursuing their line of reasoning as to what led to their divorce. And so perhaps this person has gone on to go down a different path. I don't know. I haven't since spoken to them. But all I know is once I started reading this passage, it changed the atmosphere of the exchange. And I'll read to you what I read. Let's stop and contemplate Hashem's exact tailor-made divine providence for a moment. Since everyone is under Hashem's control and designed to facilitate a person's individual soul correction and the correction of the world in general, then there must be a rationale behind why Hashem has instilled zero tolerance of a husband's comments and criticism in a wife. Why is this so? What is the lesson we need to learn from this? Why can't her soul tolerate criticism? My esteemed teacher, Rabbi Eliezer Berland, which is Rabbi Sholem Orish's teacher. So Rabbi Eliezer Berland Shlitas provides the answer. As a young man, I asked him to teach me the foundations of marital peace, and he taught me the following two principles. And these two principles are hinted at in the introduction by the author, which is on page 21, and he doesn't tell you what they are, and it's not until you get to page 41 or page 40 that you start to realize what they are. First, the wife is a mirror of her husband. This principle comes from the holy Arizal. Those of you that are familiar with the Arizal, this guy is a big hitter in the Torah world, to say the least. Any deficiency he sees in her is actually his own deficiency. So any man watching this that fancies himself as being Torah observant, whether you're a Jew, whether you're a Noahide, or whatever you think you are, but you think in an overarching way that you have a love for the Torah and you're observing it, and you think you're observing it in the right way, if you don't have or aren't striving for marital harmony, and there are bumps in the road at the moment, the reality is it's very probable that you are not seeing your wife as a mirror that Hashem has provided for you to show you your own faults to rectify. And this is something that is revelatory. And people don't often think about things like this because they're distracted and misled by current events and all sorts of other things. Rabbi Berlin told me that everything I see in my wife is a message for me. Frequently, a wife's unpleasant behavior is an indication of something askew in the husband's service of Hashem or of something else that needs correcting. On a more basic level, a wife's disrespect of her husband merely mirrors a husband's disrespect for his wife. If he places her on a pedestal, then she'll do likewise. The above two principles are interdependent, since any deficiency that a husband sees in his wife is really his own shortcoming. Then he certainly should try to correct her, especially by reprimanding or criticizing. Then he certainly shouldn't. I think I said should. He certainly shouldn't try to correct her, especially by reprimanding or criticizing. Instead, he should elevate himself and correct what needs correcting. When he does so, she'll automatically change for the better. Rav Berlin emphasized these two principles. Knowing what a wife is the husband's mirror, knowing that a wife is a husband's mirror, and refraining from comments and criticism no matter what, saved his own marriage. So the two important principles are, men, and I'm not talking to the ladies, I'm talking to the men, because this book is designed purely for men, and we'll get into that in a minute. Your wife is a mirror of your behavior. And so if your wife is giving you brain damage, so to speak, or giving you a hard time, then you need to stop and you need to look into your conduct and see if there's any area that you need rectifying or doing tshuva for. And 100% of the time, I was about to say 90% of the time or 95% of the time, it's not 95 or 99.9% of the time, it's 100% of the time, you will find that it's because there's something in your life that you are purposely steering clear of or compartmentalizing and doing wrong. And you're refusing to acknowledge it, and your wife is responding in the spiritual realm to that unrest and then acting in a way that steals the peace from the home, and then you're reacting at her like she's done something wrong. And the other thing is that we never criticize and we never call out our wife for this type of behavior. Rather, we see that as a warning sign from Hashem that we have to fix something in our own lives. And if we do that, the wife, her attitude will change. And people say, oh, really? And the answer is yes. If you really choose to rectify what it is that's causing the unrest, that's going to be the solution. I want to read it again. First, the wife is the mirror of the husband. Second, never make any remarks, comments, or criticisms about anything she does, even if she's done a gross misdeed. I don't know if I read that. I think I missed it because I'm like, hang on, when did I read the second? So the two principles are, the wife is a mirror of the husband, and a husband should never make any remarks, comments, or criticisms about anything that the wife does or doesn't do. Or, even if she does a gross misdeed. Even if she's found talking to another man or something like that. Yes, it's wrong. You're not meant to pat her on the back and go, yeah, thanks for that. But you're to see that as a warning or a shot across the bow, so to speak, by Hashem to tell you, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing going to the cash register and sitting and having a little chat with the young lady at the cash register for a good 2 minutes after you've made the purchase and complimenting her on her fingernails and the way she smells? What are you doing? You're a married man. Do you see what I'm saying? And so you have to be aware that perhaps your behavior is causing your lack of shalom bayit in the home because you're not acting like a married man. And if your wife was to be a fly on the wall and follow you just on a simple errand to go to the shops to pick up a container of milk, perhaps there's more than one thing that you do along the way that she would find questionable. And you'd be like, oh, it's not a problem, it's all right, she doesn't understand. No, my friend. If you have that attitude, then if your wife does something that upsets you and she then says, oh, it's not a problem, he's just, overreacting, that doesn't help the situation because you both need to be acting in accordance with the other one's desire. So if we go back to the introduction, we continue to read, the Garden of Peace is a marriage manual for men. As such, it places the burden of marital peace on men. And this is the key thing that I wanted to address in this video, is this book is absolutely forbidden for women to read. Now, Rabbi Shalom Arush has written a book exclusively for women that's forbidden for men to read. I believe it's entitled Women's Wisdom. He's written several other works called The Garden of Emunah and The Garden of Yearning, In Forest Fields and Women's Wisdom. Now, Women's Wisdom may not be the one exclusively to women. It might be one of the other ones because I've only read this book so far. If it is, correct me in the comments. But there is a book that is like this book, focused on Shalom Bayit, but it's exclusively for women, and men are forbidden to read it. In fact, not only are women forbidden to read the one for men, it goes on to say that if you refrain from reading the one that's forbidden to you, you'll get a special blessing. Let me explain. Therefore, I strongly discourage women from reading this book. Women who read this book will likely misuse the lofty standards that it sets for husbands as a weapon against their husbands, in that respect, this book will undermine their marital bliss instead of enhancing it. I hope that women will be prudent enough to listen to me. And then we skip a paragraph and it says, I bless every woman who resists the temptation to read this book with all the very best of marital and spiritual abundance, marital bliss and gratification from their children, who with Hashem's help will grow up in the path of the righteous in strength of body, mind and soul. Shalom Urush, written in Jerusalem in the month of Sivan 5768. So here you have a statement of blessing if you refrain from reading a book. So normally we get a blessing if we read a book on a Torah principle or concept, but in this case, you're getting a blessing if you avoid reading it. And so if you're a lady that's watching this video, it was permissible for you to listen to the video up to now because I haven't said anything about this, but up to this point, I'll have to ask you to turn off the video if that's all right. But that should be enough information for you to get this book and purchase it for your husband and resist the temptation to read it yourself and get a hold of women's wisdom if you can. Okay, we'll give you a bit of time to turn the video off. All right, let's keep going. So some of the other things, this book just addresses so many things. You didn't know that there was so many moving parts to this peace in the home, and there's still more. There's still an infinite amount of information there that a person needs to be across, and it's a full-time job. Now, when I say that, you've still got to work a mundane job to support your family and feed yourselves, but there's really no excuse to have any downtime to be doing anything else when there's so much wisdom out there to be learnt. And the crime is not so much that a person ends up being wicked rather than the fact that they've missed out on the potential to hear so much wisdom. Because even the most wickedest person, if they heard some real wisdom, it may be enough to snap them out of their path of destruction. This person's just never been sat down by anybody and given the time of day by anybody who is really trying to do the right thing to impart with them the wisdom of the truth. And you'd be surprised how much a lot of these people would really turn without much effort and do the right thing if they were just given the opportunity to hear some of the wisdom that was available out there. We're living in a time where a lot of this wisdom is so much more prevalent than it used to be, but there's so much more destruction that's available at arm's length now as well. So we have to be careful because the war is now has become now so abrupt, meaning that we can in an instant get wisdom or we can in an instant get sheker, get falsehood. So it's divided up into 14 chapters, and there's a little glossary, and the chapters are further divided into topics with subject headers, which will really help you and help me as I've shared when I was speaking to this gentleman, because I could find the subject on The Wife is the Mirror straight away. We have subjects in chapter 2. Subjects in chapter 1 is entitled Remaining Single, the Exalted Sage, the Pillar of Compassion, Shlita, the True Purpose, Practice Makes Perfect. Now, the interesting subject, and this is kind of the first subject that hits you out of the gates, is the option of remaining single. Now, if a man has the ability to remain single, which some men do, most men don't, especially in this day and age with all the temptations and things that you can't avoid seeing, even if it's a billboard on the way to work, the rude shock that a lot of these people are going to be in come their day when they're standing before the Beit Din in Shemayim is that the opportunity to have taken a wife and brought children into the world, yes, would have brought with it great hardship and perils and potentials for such great disaster, because you're juggling keeping a wife happy and raising kids in the right way, and you in the midst of this, you've got to keep a job and learn Torah. Whereas if you don't get married and you don't have kids and you don't really feel that that's going to be an issue for you, you don't feel tempted to want to be intimate. But be that as it may, and you come to the end of your life, there is a thing that is such that going down that path of having a family enables you to exercise your ability to refine your traits. If I can describe that in a way that people can understand. And so if you stay single, there's no unrest in the home because there's nobody else there but you. And so you're having a great life. Things are going really well. There's no unrest in the home because there's no one else there. It's just you, and life's easy, and you can just learn Torah all day. Go to work, come home, learn Torah. But the idea is that you do perpetuate the species, continue the human race, because it's one of the commandments. And so if you choose not to do that, yes, it's going to be a far easier life. You're going to learn way more Torah. You're going to maybe get to very lofty levels. But the potential levels you could have got to if you were learning the Torah in the midst of a difficult trial of bringing children into the world, getting them a job, making sure they go to a good school, getting them a job, making sure your wife is happy with you and them, and then also learning Torah, which is all of these things are required, then much greater is the reward because a husband chooses to continue the species forward. I mean, if everybody chose to remain single, mankind will just stop. And so the ideal path is to have a family if one can do so, if one is in a position to do so. So let's have a little bit of a read, and this is on page 25, and it's under chapter 1 header. It's just under an opening paragraph, the most important mitzvah. And this is under the subheading, remaining single. One's objective in life is to cling to Hashem, His Torah, and His commandments. Apparently, it's easier to do so as a bachelor without the yoke of a wife, children, and livelihood, because you don't need to earn as much money because it's just you're sustaining. If so, one could surmise that Hashem would want us to remain single as we could serve Him with no outside interference. Even the Gemara says that a married man has a millstone around his neck, not a milestone, a millstone, excuse me. In other words, a formidable burden. Yet the reality is that Hashem doesn't want us to remain single. So even the Talmud says a married man, he's carrying this millstone around his neck, which is, almost, you don't ever go for a swim, you'll never be found again. But despite that, that doesn't mean that the Gemara is making a criticism about the office of marriage. Rather, if you study what it says and not take these passages, as most people do from the Talmud, out of context, you'll realize that passage alone is actually elevating the sanctity of marriage by saying those things. And unless you are willing to study the Talmud, that's going to elude you. And so you think, the Talmud is against marriage. No, it's not. It's for marriage. But if you aren't prepared to read the sentence in context and read it, the overall discussion and where it arrives at, you are going to get the wrong impression of the Gemara, which most people do, to their own peril. Hashem punishes Aaron's sons Nadav and Avihu because they didn't take wives and marry, even though they were, according to the Zohar, righteous men on the level of Moshe. King Hezekiah, a pious and an upright sage with the soul of Mashiach, in whose merit all of Israel learned Torah, received a heavenly death sentence because he hadn't yet taken a wife. The sentence was only rescinded when he quickly married Isaiah's daughter. This leads us to ask, why is it so important to get married? So even though Hezekiah was such a righteous man, he was under a death sentence and his life was going to be shortened unless he put himself in a position where it was going to be more difficult for him to maintain his level of righteousness with taking a wife and starting a family. Do you understand this? Do you understand where we're coming from here? So what Hashem is doing is saying, I'm not happy that you are following a stoic, isolated lifestyle to remain your set of, to keep a high level of set apartness. Rather, I'd much more want you to be a part of what everybody else is doing and try and maintain that holiness there. And it's similar to a person who goes and lives in the woods on his own. And it's not like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who has a death sentence on him and it's a pekuach nefesh. He hides in a cave for 10 years with his son. But you're just doing it because it's just all too much of a hassle. And Hashem condemns that lifestyle. These people that, go out of their way to isolate themselves so they can study Torah around the clock and not interact with normal life. Because if everybody did that, life wouldn't function. So it's not now, there are exceptions to the rules where there are sages that have done that. There's Zadikim Nistarim, which is the hidden righteous ones. But at some point they come out and present themselves to the public. This leads us to ask, why is it so important to get married? Why are those that didn't marry punished so severely? Nadab and Avihu and Hezekiah simply wanted to fulfill the mitzvah and learn Torah without any disturbances, to cling to Hashem and to enjoy the sublime spiritual delights of the next world in this world. So why does Hashem require a person to marry? Doesn't the mitzvah of taking a wife provide for all of her needs, tie a person down to this lowly material world? Here's the answer. The purpose of creation, one's observance of Torah and attaining tikkun, that is repair, or correction of the soul, can only be achieved within the context of marital relationship and a peaceful home. So the only way you're going to merit salvation, if you are eligible for marriage, because some people aren't even eligible to get married. They're disfigured, they're exceedingly ugly, maybe they have a smell that's really bad. Okay, that's a different scenario. But if somebody has the ability to get married and they choose not to, they are putting their souls in jeopardy, because the whole reason they've been sent to the world is being vetoed, they're nullifying it, they're subverting it, they're supplanting it. Therefore, marriage is senseless without shalom bayit. Therefore, marriage is senseless without shalom bayit, peace in the home. Without marital peace, why marry? Why commit transgression and make your wife miserable, since one can observe the Torah fully and attain tikkun only as a married man? If he doesn't get married, he renders himself superfluous in the world. Even worse, the world can't be fully corrected if the individual doesn't fulfill his purpose. So if you're not addressing the purpose that you've been set down in the world to do, and whatever that purpose is whatever you struggle with, then you are not contributing to the correction of the world. You're adding to its destruction, because you're refusing to address the reasons why you've been sent into the world. But Jason, I don't know what the reasons I've been sent into the world are. Yes, you do. Everyone does. If they didn't, that would be a cruel maker. But Jason, I honestly don't know why I've been sent into the world. Well, you're either very ignorant or you're a liar. Within 5 seconds, you can work out why you've been sent into this world. Why do I say that? Because whatever it is you struggle with, and you've got to be struggling with something, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Hashem would not have jettisoned you back down into the world if you were perfect, you rectified everything, and you had nothing that you struggled with. So you merely recall, which takes 5 seconds, what you struggle with, and that's the reason you've been put into the world, to rectify those things. Takes you less than 5 seconds to do it. Do many people do it? No. What merit did you have clicking on this video? Don't know. Probably the best video you've ever clicked on in your life. This is the beginning. Boom. This is starting your journey now. Go. And one of the things that chiefly helps you address why you've been brought down into the world is becoming married. Entering the institution of marriage. Because it is hard. And it does require you to actually exercise patience. You don't need any patience when you live on your own. You can do whatever you like, whenever you like. You can follow your own timetable. You don't have to work around anyone. It's just you. And again, if you're somebody that nobody's interested in being married to, bless the creator of the universe. Bless him until you run out of vocal cords. But you got to be honest, are you really somebody that's out of that race? Some people just say, "Oh, yeah," and really they have a potential to meet a multitude of people, but they go out of their way to not look after themselves, to try and get out of it. And don't play games with Hashem. He's not a fool that you can play games with him like that. Let's elaborate on the above concept with the help of two following parables which describe situations that each one of us can relate to. The holy celibate Shlita. In the earliest days, the holy celibate Shlita decided that his soul yearns for Torah. He concluded that his very best move would be to remain single to find a secluded house of study where he could devote the days of his life in Torah and to the divine service. Soon the holy celibate Shlita discovered a tiny clapboard synagogue in a rural village far off the beaten track, and he asked permission from the local beadle to eat, sleep and drink within the confines of the synagogue, which also served as the village house of study. He solemnly promised not to disturb a soul, and the beadle agreed. The holy celibate Shlita would quietly sit in the corner learning day and night with no disturbance or interpretation. He barely left the house of study. He limited his food intake to a few dry crusts of bread, denying himself any semblance of bodily pleasure, and he drank water from a tap, and he slept on a wooden hard bench. Days, months, and years transpired in this manner until the fearful day when Beadle found the elderly holy celibate Shlita lying lifelessly on the floor of the synagogue. The entire village escorted the holy celibate Shlita on the way to his final resting place. They couldn't find adequate words to express his holiness and esotericism. If I pronounced that wrong, forgive me. All the villagers were certain that such an individual, totally withdrawn and aloof from anything mundane, was surely a great tzaddik, was surely a great righteous person. In fact, the holy celibate Shlita agreed with the villagers. He was sure that he was a tzaddik of lofty merits. As his soul ascended, so he himself thought he was righteous too. As his soul ascended to the heavenly court, he was certain that he would be greeted by an honor guard of history's greatest tzaddikim playing lyres and cymbals, accompanied by a choir of archangels singing in 6-part harmony. He was positive that they'd be escorting him to the rightful station beneath the heavenly throne to bask in the sublime light of the divine presence. The holy celibate Shlita suffered a horrifying shock of disappointment. No souls of the great tzaddikim arrived to greet him. He didn't hear any angels playing music in his honor. All he saw were the images of his parents and ancestors standing in front of him with dejected countenance. Without any further delay, he was ushered into the heavenly courtroom where he stood before the tribunal of very stern-looking tzaddikim. The Chief Justice opened a large volume, the life story of the holy celibate Shlita, and he reviewed all of the holy celibate Shlita's mitzvot, and then he addressed him by his first name, ignoring the dignified title of the holy celibate Shlita. The Chief Justice said, Yoske, I think his name was Yoske, you learned quite a bit of Torah, you prayed and you made the necessary blessings, you put on tefillin daily and you wore tzitzit, you observed the Sabbath and the holidays, and you fasted even more than required. In fact, you've done a great job of observing the mitzvot. There's a problem with all your good deeds. There's a problem though with all your good deeds. You didn't complete the mission that you were supposed to complete in the physical world. You learned Torah, but you failed to implement what you learned. Had you married, you would have seen how far away you are from true Torah observance. For then you would have to invest much more effort to fulfill each mitzvah. You see what's happening here? Casting a chastising glance at the shocked soul of the holy celibate Shlita, the Chief Justice added, don't you know that the entire purpose of learning Torah was to acquire emunah, that is faith? The level of emunah that you attain is extremely inadequate. Had you married, you'd been required to face a long list of trials and tribulations with your wife, when she would have hindered your Torah learning with various demands. You would have failed the tests. Whenever she would have belittled or scolded you, you'd have tarnished your soul with anger and complaining. Only then would you have seen how weak your emunah really is. You thought you trusted in Hashem, but if you'd been faced with the challenge of providing for a wife and children, you'd have seen just how frail your trust in Hashem really is. And I'm sure this video is speaking to many people, many men who are in that position. Maybe you've separated from your wives, maybe you're divorced, maybe you've deliberately never got married because you want to be close to Hashem. And what you've done is you've avoided any trials and tribulations, so your sword goes back to Shemayim untempered. So they can't process you and promote you to the angelic host because you're like a sword that hasn't been tempered for battle. So after a sword has been smithed, it has to be tempered by the blacksmith so it won't shatter when it's struck. You haven't been tempered. You never allowed yourself the opportunity to go through hardship because you chose the path of least resistance, thinking you were doing the right thing. But your emunah never got a workout. You never went once to the gym of faith. Never once. I think we'll leave it there because it just goes on from there. But you can see the point that is being trying to be made here, even despite my few silly attempts to try and tell you what this book is about and what it deals with. My futile attempts, hopefully they're not futile and silly, but I really can't recommend this book enough. I don't think I've held it up yet. That's how excited I am by it. There you go, I'm holding it up now. So please go out and get this book. Do not delay. Even if you're married, even if you're about to get married, even if you're divorced, even if you're separated, get this book and read it. If you are a man and you think of yourself as being somebody who wants to cling to the God of the Jews and, be of the same cloth as Moshe, Avraham Avinu. You believe in the Torah, you like the Torah, you want to be obedient to the Torah, then face this head on. Get your head out of all the other stuff you've been chasing after, and this is probably what you need to be getting a hold of. I can't recommend this book enough. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you found this video helpful, please please put down a comment if you like, please be polite, and please subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video, particularly if you have a mate that you know is maybe having marital issues, and this video might point them in the right direction to get this book. I'll put a link in the description down below to buy it from the actual best place that supports the author. Thank you again for joining me. Until next time, bye for now.